Welcome, dear listeners, to Haunting Shadows, where the darkness comes alive with every tale we tell. I'm your host, and today we have a spine-chilling experience to share with you, straight from the depths of our own subscribers' haunting memories. But before we dive into the shadows, a quick reminder. If you're new here and these eerie stories captivate your soul, hit that subscribe button and join our community of night dwellers. Tonight's story takes us deep into the heart of an ancient forest, where our protagonist, a forest officer, encountered something beyond the realm of the living. So, turn off the lights, sit back, and prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown. Without further ado, let's unravel the mystery of the forest officer's terrifying encounter. People say that lonely, unknown places are inhabited by ghosts and spirits. For a long time, I never believed in such things, but now I do. This story is from the time when I had just joined duty as a new forest officer. During those initial days, I had a very terrifying experience, but by God's grace, I came out of it safely. This incident happened in 1997, in the month of December. My first posting was far away from my home. I had only been on duty for 2 months when we received news that there was going to be some smuggling related to animals through the forest routes. So, my 2 fellow forest guards and I were patrolling the areas around the forest. I was keeping an eye on every person and thing passing through the forest. The 2 forest guards with me were named Robert and Bruce. Bruce and Robert were patrolling in a separate jeep, while I was patrolling in another jeep in the area. There was a deserted place in the middle of the forest where a small outpost of the forest department was built. Usually, no one stayed there. If an officer went deep into the forest, he used that place for safety and rest. It was my first time there. That day, I don't know what happened, but by evening I started feeling very ill. Outwardly, I seemed fine, but I was feeling very weak inside, as if I needed rest urgently. So I stayed at that outpost for a while. Bruce and Robert were patrolling the surrounding areas. They told me to go home and rest, but I refused. I told them that if anything went wrong there, it would be my responsibility, so I wouldn't leave under any circumstances. Their repeated insistence made me suspicious of them, so I decided to stay at the outpost. I told them I would stay there. When I said this, Robert stared at me with wide eyes. I asked him why he was looking at me like that. Robert looked away and said, "Sir, no officer stays here at this outpost at night." I replied with a slight smile, "Yes, but I am not feeling well, and I don't want any illegal activities to happen in my absence." Bruce stepped forward and said, "Sir, this forest is not safe to stay in at night, especially this place. We can stay in a nearby village if you want." Hearing their words made me even more suspicious of them. I thought maybe they were involved in the smuggling too. So, I finally ordered them to arrange food for me and get some medicines if possible, but I wasn't going anywhere. Hearing my order, Robert stepped forward again. "Sir, you are here for the first time. We have been here for the last 4 years. You don't know this forest. It's really dangerous here." I put my hand on Robert's shoulder and said, "Humans face danger in every forest, but we are forest guards, and we are paid for this." Bruce interrupted me. "Sir, you are not understanding. It's not wild animals that pose a threat here, but ghosts and spirits." Listening to him, I angrily told him not to talk nonsense. "These are all made-up stories." Bruce tried to explain again. "Sir, many people have seen a ghost here. Not just people, but some of our officers have also felt something strange here. They say that a spirit roams here in the dark and preys on people." Hearing their words made me even angrier. I asked them one last time if they had seen the spirit. When both of them shook their heads in denial, I said, "Fine. You both will stay with me here until we see that spirit. We won't go anywhere." Hearing this, they got scared and started making excuses to leave. So I explained to them, "Look, understand the situation. These are all rumors spread by the local goons. They want us to stay away from their area to carry out illegal activities. This is why they spread such false stories among the villagers. If you don't want to stay, then don't, but do what I've asked you to do." Hearing this, they fell silent and whispered to each other as they left the outpost. After a while, I heard the sound of a vehicle, which meant they had finally left. I looked around the outpost. There were some bottles of alcohol and glasses covered in dust, and some other unnecessary items. On one wall of the outpost, there was a map of the forest. I went to the map and found the outpost. Behind the outpost, there was a blue line, which meant there must be a river flowing behind it. I opened the window at the back of the outpost and saw that the area behind it was filled with dense trees and bushes. There was still some time before it got dark, so I went outside the outpost. As the evening progressed, the cold around began to intensify. I walked towards the back of the outpost. The area behind was very dense, and as thick as it was equally silent. I could hear the distant sounds of wild animals. I wanted to see the river flowing nearby. I went further through the tall trees and bushes. It was true that it was my first time there, so I didn't know anything about the place. After walking a few hundred meters, I saw a slight slope, and beyond that slope, a river was flowing. I went down the slope. The river's water was very calm. I could hear the chirping of birds living in the trees by the river. All the birds were returning to their nests, indicating that darkness was just a few moments away. Then, I remembered that I had forgotten to bring a torch. Since it was starting to get dark, I didn't stay there long and went back to my outpost. As soon as I went inside the outpost, I closed the door and left only the back window open. Now I was also starting to feel some body aches. I cleaned a chair, took it, and sat with my back towards the window. Cold gusts of wind were coming in through the window. Sitting there, I was massaging my own neck and head with my hands. Suddenly, it felt like someone was standing behind me, outside the window. I stopped moving and tried to listen to the sound coming from behind. It felt like someone was breathing heavily behind me, and I could even feel the warmth of that breath on my neck. I slowly took my gun in my hand and quickly turned around, but there was nothing there. I tried to look out into the darkness from the window, but I couldn't see anything in the distance. There wasn't much darkness yet, but the sun had almost set, and a kind of dim darkness spread all around. Just as I was about to turn my gaze away, I saw a human-like figure moving among the trees in the distance. I picked up the torch lying nearby and tried to see far into the dim darkness, but everything was normal again. Still, I kept looking in that direction for quite a while, hoping to see some movement, but nothing happened after that. Then I thought that this is a forest, and such sounds and movements are common. There was no need to be scared by this. Thinking this, I turned to face the window and sat down again. Just then, I heard the sound of a vehicle from outside. An hour later, Robert and Bruce returned. By the time they came back, everything was engulfed in darkness. They brought me a blanket and some essential food items. Perhaps they couldn't find any medicine for me. I wasn't feeling too unwell, but inside, I felt very weak. So, I told them again that they could stay if they wanted to. Bruce shook his head and replied, "Sir, there's still time. It's not always good to test people's beliefs or superstitions. We can stay in a nearby village and keep an eye from there too." I firmly refused their suggestion and expressed my desire to stay right there. "All right, I will take care of myself, but you two keep an eye on any movements around. If you notice anything wrong, report to me here immediately." Hearing my words, both of them left. I closed the door and finished my meal on the table. After eating, I started reading a book related to the forest department that was lying there. The cold outside was increasing, so I closed all the windows. The electricity was coming from the nearby village. Around 9 o'clock, the power suddenly went out. I groped around in the dark, wondering if the electricity would come back. Although I had decided to stay there, the power outage made me feel strange. I couldn't keep the torch on all night, so I took the torch and went outside. As soon as I stepped out, I felt the biting cold. It was a strange, piercing cold. In the torchlight, I walked to my Jeep, took the lantern from the car, and turned back. Just then, I felt as if someone had touched me from behind. I immediately turned around, but there was no one there. I noticed some movement a little distance away. It was the rustling sound of dry leaves. Something was shining in the dark, as if someone was standing far away, staring at me through the dense darkness. As soon as I took a step forward, I heard the sound of leaves again, as if someone else had taken a step with me. My gun was inside the outpost, and if there was any wild animal around, I had to get back inside the outpost somehow. I looked around in the torchlight and quickly walked towards the outpost. As I walked, the strange dragging sound also grew louder. I jumped inside the outpost and immediately closed the door. I was thinking about what kind of sound it was, a dragging sound, or someone walking. After calming down a bit, I convinced myself again that this was a forest, and such sounds are common. But to be honest, sometimes people like us make brave decisions, only to regret them later. At that moment, I felt exactly that way. The eerie silence of the forest and the dense darkness were making me rethink my decision. I lit the lantern and lay down with a thick book in one corner. I didn't even realize when the book slipped from my hands and I fell asleep. A while later, I started feeling a strange pressure on my body, as if someone was sitting on my chest and scratching my neck with their nails. I was trying with all my might to wake up, but for some reason, I couldn't move, as if my entire body was paralyzed. I don't know if it was the fever or something else, but somehow, I opened my eyes. I saw two glowing eyes staring at me right in front of mine. With disheveled hair and a strange smile on its lips, it was looking at me, laughing with its jaws wide open. Sticky water was dripping from its hair onto my face. Its curly hair covered my entire face, so I couldn't see anything around. It moved its face away from mine and covered my whole face with one hand. It had a horrible, rotten smell coming from its body. I was using all my strength to resist, but for some reason, I was just lying there. Then, with a terrifying scream like an animal, it dug its nails into my neck with its other hand. A sharp pain surged through me, and with all my might, I threw it off my chest and away. I woke up with a start and looked around. There was no one there. The loud scream was as if someone had screamed right into my ear. My heart was racing. I didn't know how long that had been happening to me. I was panting heavily. I looked around again, and there was no one there. I was surprised at how all this had happened to me. Then I noticed that the thing I had thrown off my chest was actually the thick book, now lying in a corner. Rubbing my eyes, I looked around again. It felt like someone wanted to kill me in my sleep, but now there was no one inside. It was just an illusion. I picked up the bottle nearby, drank some water, and calmed myself down. Just then, I heard the sound of someone walking and something dragging from outside. I tried to listen to the sound while sitting in my place. I stood up, rubbing my face, and walked to the door. I put my ear to the door, but everything outside was silent. Then, I went to the back window. The dragging sound of footsteps was coming from behind. I quickly grabbed the torch lying next to my bed and went back to the window. First, I slowly opened the window and peeked outside through a small crack. It was just darkness outside. Nothing could be seen except darkness. After thinking for a while, I decided to put out the lantern, thinking that if there was a person or a smuggler outside, they wouldn't be able to see me in the dark. I fully opened the window and stood against the wall for my safety. I could still hear the sound. Someone was walking and dragging something along with them. Now, there was dense darkness on both sides. Holding the torch in one hand and the gun in the other, I stood in front of the window. Even if someone was outside, they wouldn't be able to see me. Pointing the gun in the direction of the sound, I quickly turned on the torch. There was no one nearby, but far from the window, someone was walking. It seemed to be a girl, limping on one leg and dragging the other. She wasn't fully dressed. A torn piece of cloth was hanging around her waist. I was a bit startled, but seeing her, I started thinking about what a young girl would be doing in such dense darkness at this hour. Does she know this forest? Does she live here? Or has she lost her way? Maybe she is a tribal girl from around here. The forest is such a place where, no matter how brave you are, you do feel scared. In the torchlight, I scanned the surroundings outside the window, looking at the trees, bushes, and everywhere around. I assured myself that there was no person or animal. The girl was alone, moving towards the river. The torchlight reached her, but she never once turned to look in my direction. I wondered what this girl intended to do. I turned off the torch and stood there, thinking about what to do next. Should I go outside or not? How did this girl get here, especially since she was limping? If a wild animal attacked her, she wouldn't be able to defend herself. Surely, something must have happened to her, and maybe she was in shock. But why was she heading towards the river? These questions were running through my mind. Finally, I couldn't resist. I took my torch and gun and went straight outside the outpost. I had draped a blanket over myself to hide my gun in it. In the torchlight, I walked into the dense darkness behind the outpost. By the time I got there, the girl had moved quite far, so I started walking faster in that direction. In that environment, I thought it wasn't right to call out to her, because wild animals are always lurking in the forest. Walking, I reached the slope, but I didn't know where she went after descending it. I descended the slope and reached the river. There was no one around the river, not even the girl. Before I arrived, she had vanished without a trace, as if the darkness had swallowed her. I searched everywhere I could, but there was no sign of her. While looking for the girl, one of my feet got stuck in the mud. I noticed there were footprints and dragging marks in the mud. I understood that the girl was somewhere nearby. Just then, I heard bubbles in the river. Bubbles were continuously forming on the surface of the water. I thought, maybe the girl had gone into the water. I ran to the riverbank and started looking into the water with my torch. The water was very still. There was no movement, no sound. Everything underwater appeared blurry. As I stared intently into the water, something started to shine from within, like 2 dots. I tried to focus more on those dots. They seemed to be someone's shining eyes. I was completely still, staring at those eyes without blinking. My body had turned cold. Those eyes were beckoning me into the water. I don't know how long I had been sitting there. Slowly, I saw 2 hands reaching out to me from the water. My heartbeat was racing, perhaps out of some unknown fear. I felt like a prey caught in a predator's trap. The hands emerged from the water and gently grasped my neck, pulling me backward. The wet, slimy touch of those hands sent a shiver through my entire body. A wave of unknown fear surged through me. Before I could understand what was happening, an unfamiliar face began to emerge from the water right in front of my face. It was a very strange, pale face. As it rose, its mouth began to open wider and wider. Its teeth were sharp, and its eyes were glowing. It looked like an animal, opening its jaws wide enough to swallow my entire head. I had no control over my body. I was trembling all over. Even though I could see everything, I didn't have the strength to free myself. At that moment, the nails of those hands dug into the back of my neck. A wave of sharp pain shot from my neck to my brain. The pain jolted me, and the necklace caught in my shirt slipped out and dangled in front of the girl's eyes. Seeing the necklace, the girl immediately pushed me away. It was a Holy Cross necklace. The sudden push caused me to fall back into the mud. The girl surfaced on the water like a crocodile and started growling at me, as if she wanted to attack. In the chaos, I had lost track of my gun. The torch was still on, so I could see her. I stumbled and picked up the torch, shining its light on her face. She appeared to be a beautiful girl, but she had no clothes on. Her mouth was open like that of a fierce animal, her eyes glowing in the dark, and she had large, sharp, curved nails. Seeing her terrifying form, I started to back away. Her body was slimy, covered with scratches and cuts everywhere. She began limping towards me. From her gait, I realized she was the same girl I had seen outside the window. I ran back to the outpost, shut the door as soon as I got inside, closed all the windows, and sat in a corner, trembling with fear and cold. As I sat there, I couldn't stop thinking about who or what I had seen. Who was that girl? Was she really a girl or something else? Why did she want to kill me? I was shivering with fear and cold. After a long time, I heard the sound of a vehicle. Peeking through a crack in the door, I saw Robert and Bruce arriving in a Jeep. In my terrified state, I opened the door. Seeing my condition, they both got scared. Blood was oozing from my neck. My eyes were bloodshot. My body was trembling, and I had a high fever. Bruce grabbed my hand to help me up and said, "Sir, you have a high fever, and what's this blood on your neck?" Seeing the blood, Robert quickly moved forward to support me from the other side. Seeing my condition, he started scolding me. "I told you not to stay here, sir, but you wouldn't listen. It's a good thing the senior officer asked us to bring you back, otherwise who knows what would have happened." I was in no state to talk, so I just signaled them to take me to the hospital quickly. At that time, and even for a few days afterward, I didn't tell anyone what had happened to me there. In the hospital, I simply said that a wild animal had attacked me through the window and that the marks were from its claws. After recovering in the hospital, I went back to investigate that place. I asked the local villagers about the area, and that's when I found out what had happened. A few years ago, some vile men had abused a girl there. They had assaulted a beautiful girl to satisfy their lust. After fulfilling their desires, they threw her, wounded, into the river. They spread the rumor in the village that the girl had run away with someone. After a few days, people started to believe that she had indeed run away. But some days later, people from the neighboring village saw her wandering near the river. When they went to check by the river, they found the girl's body in the water. Only then did people learn about the incident and that what they had seen was the girl's spirit. The post-mortem revealed that the girl had been dead for 7 days. Since then, many villagers had seen her wandering near the river. Friends, it is not always necessary that everything you don't believe in is false. Sometimes, you should also believe what others say. Thanks for watching. If you crave more spine-chilling tales, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Dare to join us in the darkness?